Welcome to Campus Consortium's Grant Briefing webinar on Student Services Contact Center. If you have any questions now or during today's presentation, please type them into the chat box or questions pane in the GoToMeeting control panel. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Campus Consortium Grant Briefing webinar. Today's topic for the webinar is Student Services Contact Center. Our presenter for today's session is Anthony Humphreys, President at Black Belt Health, and our facilitator today is John Wanamaker, Executive Director of Campus Consortium. We will take questions at the end of today's presentation. Please enter the questions into the chat box or questions pane in your GoToWebinar control panel. Without further ado, please allow me to present Mr. Wanamaker and Mr. Humphrey. Over to you, John.
Very good. Thank you, Rosie. Hi, everyone. This is John Wanamaker. I'm Executive Director of Campus Consortium. I want to thank you for joining us today and taking time out to join our webinar and to get to know Anthony and to learn a little bit about the Student Services Contact Center grant that we are currently running through the consortium. This webinar will focus on how our Student Services Contact Center grant can help your institution implement this solution at an affordable price. In this session, we will review the grant opportunities and we'll learn more about Student Services Contact Center. We'll talk a little bit about the offerings and the benefits to the institution, some of the key features of the grant and of the solution and services, and we'll walk you through application and the consideration process to give you better understanding of a little bit about the Campus Consortium in terms of how we were founded, how we were funded, and what one can expect after applying for one of our grants. I'd like to go to slide 3 here and give you a quick overview of the Campus Consortium and give you a little bit of a deeper dive into who we are and how we're organized and how we are funded. Campus Consortium was founded about 16 years ago and is now a leading nonprofit organization with thousands of members across the globe. The consortium's mission is to help its members as we aim to reduce the time, cost, and effort associated with implementing enterprise IT services by leveraging shared IT services, sharing lessons learned, some best practices that other institutions have implemented as they approach the navigation and the implementation of different solutions and services. We're all about how we help each member, one another, in the way that we can help avoid reinventing the wheel each time that it comes to adopting new tech for an institution. In slide 4, I do want to just call out a couple of our different sponsors, and I want to thank all of our technology vendors who are working to help support not only this broadcast, but some of the other broadcasts that we do. We do a monthly series called Ed Talks, and this is a topic on some of the largest trends and topics that are impacting technology and education today and some of the outcomes we aim to deliver for our learners. We also are doing a series of publications. We do a number of white papers, case studies, a variety of success stories, all featuring some of our members and how the Campus Consortium grant program is driving improved outcomes for institutions. All of this would not be helpful without the support of our sponsors, such as Unified, Quick Launch, Oracle, Black Belt Health, and Salesforce. On slide 5, I do want to quickly just give you a look at some of the different Campus Consortium grants that we run. We do run about 25 total grants over the year, but we do run a series of technology grants. We have a list here of the 2019 grants that are currently still open. Each of these are designed to provide a variety of solutions, products, and services to institutions at a reduced cost. We encourage you to check out campusconsortium.org, where you can learn more about the grants listed here. These grants are all still open, and in the next slide, you will see a list of what's open until the 27th of this month. All right, so with that said, I would like to introduce you to the speaker of today's session, Anthony Humphreys. Anthony has served higher education in diverse, important roles for more than 28 years and helped organizations thrive through his expertise in developing analyzing and executing growth initiatives. Prior to joining Black Belt Health, he served education technology companies like Blackboard and Lucien. And in today's session, Anthony will talk about the Student Services Contact Center solution and how the implementation of services here can be of help to your institution. With that said, I would like to turn this over to Anthony and welcome him to today's presentation. Anthony?
Great. Thank you very much, John, and I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Thanks for that great introduction. I'm really excited about today's webinar and happy to see some institutions that I've either been on their campus before or know individuals at, be it West Virginia Northern Community College or Thomas Nelson Community College or Tougaloo College and others. So it's great to see a really nice mix of universities and colleges and community colleges from across the country. So thank you again to everybody for joining, and look forward to kind of walking us through what we thought we'd cover today. You can see our agenda slide here, but we really want to focus on these kind of 6 key areas. Really effective ways to reduce lines on campus and really improve efficiency. But also, maybe even more importantly than that, it's how do we find a way to really serve the distance-based students or non-campus students as well as the presence-based students, and do that in a way where it's a highly personalized experience and a highly satisfied experience for students as well. And there are many times that I'll say students, but know that our services can be used for students, staff, and faculty, and we'll cover all of that in just a moment. But we also want to help institutions operate more efficiently and really expand access to 24/7 service, because that's what we hear so many times from our focus groups of students that say, you know, my institution is open maybe somewhat extended hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but boy, you know, I really need help with something relating to my college experience at 10 o'clock at night, or even later at 2 a.m. in the morning when I'm doing homework. So that's another bullet that we wanted to cover. We really want to also enable self-help apps, really drive student expectations by engaging with them and really leveraging today's technology in omni-channel communication. And when I say omni-channel, what I'm looking at there are things like chat and voice bots, in addition to phone calls, SMS text messaging, live chat, and other communication modes such as those. And then lastly, we'll just touch on student nudging as well. So if you'd like to advance the next slide, but I thought I'd cover quickly is kind of today's higher education imperative. And I'm going to actually start with a story if you'll engage me. And it's a true story. It's a story about my son. And my son just graduated from college just this last year, but prior to that was attending an institution in the Southern California area. I'm not sure if he wanted to get as far away from mom and dad as possible. I'm based here in the DC area, but he ended up going to a university in Southern California. But it was very interesting watching him through the recruitment, enrollment, and re-enrollment process and the matriculation process year over year. And the story that I'd like to tell is a true story that happened actually his first year. And it happened about this time of the year when he was a freshman. And what happened was my wife and I were at home and we received a letter from, and I'm just going to call it XYZ institution, so we protect the innocent here. But we received a letter from XYZ University, and the letter was disturbing at least. And it was disturbing because the letter had incorrect information in it and also had kind of aggressive goals. And what I mean by that is the institution wrote us a letter and said, your balance due for the end of the fall semester is $20,000, which it wasn't, because my son was actually a swimmer. So he was on an athletic scholarship. So his tuition balance was actually zero. But the letter then went on to say from the institution, please pay by the end of December or your student will be deregistered for spring. So now they had my sincere and undivided attention, as you can imagine as a parent. When a parent receives a letter saying, first of all, here's a balance due, which we all know is frequently incorrect, but more importantly, pay that balance or your student will be deregistered. So that's kind of what I like to call the nuclear option that schools sometimes use. But anyway, the end of the story is, of course, at the bottom of the letter, it said, if you do have any questions, it was a very nice ending. It said, if you have any questions or concerns, please contact XYZ institution, between the hours of whatever, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday. So of course I, waited to the next day because I was on the East Coast and the college is on the West Coast. And I called, and lo and behold, this was about 3 weeks from today, right around December 22nd of that year. And when I called, the message that I heard was, "Thank you for reaching XYZ University. We are now closed for the winter break. And we will not reopen until January 3rd of next year." So you can imagine as a parent getting a letter saying that you owe a balance. That's wrong. I mean, if it were $10, I would have just paid it and gotten a refund. But their answer was it's $20,000, which of course is incorrect. And more importantly, pay this bill or your student will be deregged, and you must pay it by the end of December. Which of course I couldn't reach anyone to make that payment, number one, but to talk to about how to make that correct. So you can imagine that kind of a letter throws fear into the hearts of every parent. Now, I'm a parent that has been in higher ed for many, many years. I was a financial aid director and a VP of students. So I know that this was probably a system-generated letter. But the reason I bring up that story on this slide is there really is a new higher ed imperative today. And that imperative is that students are incredibly diverse today. The programs and institutions are much, much more competitive. But maybe most important of those three bullets, student expectations are significantly higher than they have ever been. And, anytime I talk to other parents or other higher ed professionals, they sometimes will pause and say, "Do you think that's really true?" And what I then do is I take them immediately back to whenever they were in undergrad, whether that was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. When I was an undergrad, there was no concept of escalating an issue if I didn't get the answer I wanted to either a vice president or a president of the institution. It was just, that was the answer. But today's students are much, much more willing to be demanding and have higher expectations, and will frankly immediately escalate concerns to leadership at an institution. So that doesn't mean that we should shy away from doing our job and our mission in higher ed, which is to try to teach students of course, the educational content, but how to navigate the halls of higher ed, if you will. But when you combine that with really the hyper-focus on enrollment, retention, and completion today, every single institution and every person on that institution today in the U.S. Are really trying to do everything that is possible to, number one, make a student very happy, number two, highly engaged, and number three, likely to persist, retain, and complete. Because that really is the super critical issue today. So when you think of those issues, let's go to the next slide. I'll share with you a couple industry trends very quickly, but I hope that you're seeing the link between the story of maybe a poor customer service experience that I had relating to my son in college. And really, because when I got that letter and tried to call and couldn't get through to anyone, my thought was really, well, maybe he should be deregged and go somewhere else, frankly. And that was really obviously just a knee-jerk reaction. But the bottom line was I felt somewhat let down by this institution that was so polite and so welcoming to my son throughout the enrollment and registration process, but then sort of changed its tune, if you will, between fall and spring. So when you look at industry trends, and we do a lot of these types of focus groups at Black Belt Help, the one that I want to call your attention to is the item in the bottom middle. And I think that's the most telling. I think all of those stats are interesting, but when you look at the fact that 87% of the students globally want a single app that's accessible from any device to manage their experience, you start to get a glimpse of what students are really saying is required today. And yes, they certainly may go to an institution for their signature programs, but once they've made that decision to go to whatever university because they feel that's the right fit for their student or the right fit for them, it very quickly then becomes a question about, well, how are the services? Am I able to get help when I need it? And do I feel that this institution is valuable and is worth the investment that we're making? So those are critical questions. And if you want to, Rosie, let's go to the next slide, because the other interesting trend that we saw when we asked students as well, this was a survey done by Lucian, very interesting indeed in terms of, what would you find very or extremely helpful? Now, clearly the first thing that a student might think is, well, I really want a what if tool to see when I'll graduate. So that number one item makes complete sense. Whether you're a Gen X or you're a Gen Z or Gen Y student, millennial, et cetera, that makes sense. But the second item down was a little surprising to me. It was that student said the second most important thing to me as a student is a virtual one-stop. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do we enable different tools that can provide a virtual one-stop and really provide for students today 24/7 access to services on campus. But on top of that, as I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about even faculty getting access to support for their IT or LMS questions, be it for Canvas, Desire to Learn, Blackboard, or any other LMS. We do serve both all three, students, faculty, and staff, to resolve their questions whenever they come up 24/7. So that's the idea of a virtual one-stop. Let's go to the next slide. And what I thought I'd also talk about here is really kind of a fractured experience that, somewhat sadly is on most campuses today, and not all, but on most. Meaning, if a student or a faculty member has a question about logging into their LMS, maybe the student has a question about, how much financial aid do I have, or what document am I missing, have I been admitted to the housing dorm that I want? All of those things are very different questions that today, typically students are bounced around to different offices to answer those questions, either physically if they're on campus, but maybe more importantly is even if they're calling in or texting someone, the idea is that they're still getting referred around campus in a virtual environment. And the one very short story that I will tell here is think about your latest experience buying something on Amazon. And imagine if Amazon said, well, we can only help you with the order of your item, but once you've purchased it, you need to call someone else to pay. And then once you've paid, you need to call another vendor to actually find out the location of your item and if it's in stock. And then finally, you need to also call someone else if you want to check on the shipping status or when it will arrive, right? So what Amazon has done so well, of course, is there are actually different vendors for all of those different steps in buying something online today. But what they've done so well and why they've grown so quickly is because they've eliminated those different barriers and lines between the different vendors and have a very seamless, very high quality, very personalized experience that enables folks and makes folks want to come back time and time again. So the idea here, the analogy or the metaphor is to make sure that we can do that for colleges as well and really break down these fractured experiences and provide a unified experience, as we'll see on the next slide, on slide 13. So Rosie, if you'll advance to the next slide, that'd be great. What we've got there is really the comparison of an old model and a new model for student service, right? The old model is really either one of three ways. Either you can call in, you can try to get an answer during regular office hours, or you can try to, of course, come in and either wait in line for a specialist. And in many cases, those experiences just end up in frustration because in so many cases, the institution is just overwhelmed. And it's not a negative on any institution. It's just that there's so much work to be done, whether it's the packaging of aid or the evaluation of transcripts or the registration of students, the teaching and learning, et cetera, the counseling of students, that it's very hard sometimes to serve students that are in person. So there may be a line, but then on top of that, it's really difficult to handle phone call volume, email traffic, if students want to and the institution offers it, the text messages that may come in, and the live chats and chat bots. So what quickly happens is the institution just gets overwhelmed and all of those channels become a bottleneck. So that's kind of why many years ago, when we were part of Campus Consortium, we had many clients tell us that we wish you did services like we offer today in terms of IT support or LMS support. And we'll cover that in OneStop in just a moment. But we really then formed another company and really started to focus on how can we meet the need in a virtual one-stop of a student, staff, or faculty member 24/7, anytime, anywhere. And that's really the key of what we're going to offer. So Rosie, if you'll go ahead to slide 14, we've got a couple of polling questions we thought we'd engage the audience on, and we'll show those to you. So the first one is, right, do you have a physical one-stop with all service offices located in one building? So that's kind of a quick yes or no, so I'll let everyone answer that question. So please do go ahead and answer your question there. And what we mean by that is you may have a physical location that your financial aid, your student accounts, your reg records is all in one location, and that's a great start. Hopefully, though, those are not separate desks within the same building, but hopefully a single desk where a student or a single location, be it a kiosk, a desk, or a walk-up area where a student can go and get questions about any number of areas, be it financial aid, student accounts, IT support, et cetera. So I'll let everyone answer that one, and then we'll move on to the next one. So Rosie, if you want to close that first question, then we'll go to the next question. And great, so there are the results. So most of you said that no, that there is not a physical location. So maybe not surprising. I know many institutions are looking at these and considering a physical one-stop, but the problem is they're very expensive, right? You've got to build a new building, you've got to assign room on campus, you've got to hire more staff. In addition to the staff that may already be in the financial aid office, you might need to hire someone that has FA expertise to work in the one-stop area. So not surprising there that most folks do not have a physical one-stop because it is very expensive. So let's go to the second question. And that's kind of why we look at virtual one-stops being so critical. And that second question is, can you provide the same high-quality service to online students today that you provide to presence-based students? And I know this is somewhat of a touchy question, and we're certainly not going to store anyone's answers, but please do answer honestly. My institution where I worked for many years did not provide the same high level of quality of service to the students that were not presence-based, because the presence-based students really could walk in at any time and get service, where the phones frequently were ignored and email was always an afterthought, frankly. So we'll give folks a chance to answer that poll, and then we'll pull up the results here. Well, great, okay, about 50-50. So that's fantastic. I know what's challenging sometimes for some institutions is the ability to really provide that high quality of service during peak periods. So right about now, before spring semester begins, or the first 2 weeks of January, or really any time in July, August, and September. So that's really the key question is, if a student comes on campus or the student, let's say, sends an email, do they get their response to their question in the same amount of time? And if the answer is yes, then fantastic. If it's no, then we can look at some other tools to try to meet that need. Well, great. Let's look at the third and final question. And that third one is, do you nudge students with SMS or text to remind them of critical dates? And keep in mind, we're very literal here that are you using SMS text messages? So not email, not maybe phone calls or paper-based mail, but really the ability to send a student a text and say, don't forget to pay by tomorrow or you'll be deregged. If you go back to that story that I told about my son in his first year. So let's give folks a chance to answer that poll and we'll see the results. Wonderful. Okay, great. So 83% of you said that you do nudge students with text messages today. So fantastic. I think the key there, and Rosie, we can go on to slide 15, is to provide an experience that really is very rich, meaning multimodal and also comprehensive. So what we've tried to deploy at Black Belt Help is a platform. And what I'm going to call everyone's attention to predominantly are the three areas to the right, those three rectangles in yellow. And these are the three main solution areas that we provide solutions for to higher education institutions. So we can provide 24/7 contact center support. So that can be, anytime, night or day, Christmas Day, or any other holiday. So that's the 24/7 inbound contact center. We also enable self-help apps and tools like chatbots, voice bots, mobile apps, and knowledge bases so that students can try to get their own answer. Because what we're really learning from so many of the Gen Z students and millennials is that they really want to help themselves. But they do need to make it needs to be easy for them though. So if they have to do more than kind of, one or two or at the most 3 clicks, then they start to lose interest very quickly. So we've got to deploy things like a mobile app or a knowledge base where students can very quickly get an answer to their questions. And then the last item there in yellow on the bottom right is student nudging, and really being able to send things like a text message to remind a student of a specific call to action. So those are the different solutions that we can provide. In red, you'll see some additional tools that we have, like a ticketing system or a knowledge base. And of course, all of it is underpinned with automation, AI, and predictive analytics, and reporting and dashboards. Because again, the idea is to be able to report on the successes that you're having. So how many calls are we getting per minute, per hour, per day, per week, per month? What's our satisfaction rate with our students? How have they rated their support service? Was it complete? Did they get an accurate answer? All of those things are all data elements that we want to report to the institution so that we can always be improving. So let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, Rosie, slide 16. And this is a little bit of how we do it. So one of the things that we get very quickly is, well, how do you provide service in a virtual one-stop the same way that we would if the student were in person? Well, the way that we do that is one of two ways. We can either log into the systems on campus, or we can use one of our tools that will aggregate data from all these different systems and present it to our advisors so that they can answer student questions or faculty questions or staff questions very quickly and very easily. So what we'll do is we don't have to integrate to these systems. It's really just a one-way data pull. But whether it's your ERP or SIS, be it on Ellucian Banner, Ellucian Colleague, PeopleSoft, Workday, Genzabar, etc. But we want to pull data to answer student questions from the ERP. We'll also pull data from the LMS, again, regardless of what LMS that may be, but what are my grades? What are my courses? If you're a faculty member, how do I do a course copy? How do I enter grades? And then also things like an ITSM or a ticketing system and a CRM system. So those are all things that are super important to be able to access in real time to answer the questions that you'll see on the next slide in slide 17. So when we actually speak of a virtual one-stop, this is what we mean. And a virtual one-stop can be anything from a switchboard support, meaning, are you open? What are your hours of operation? To very detailed questions around admission status, financial aid, registration, student accounts or bursar, LMS, IT questions, is the Wi-Fi down in my dorm? If you're a professor, why can't I use the Wi-Fi in my classroom? And maybe, again, military and veterans benefits. So those are all different areas that today, more than likely, students are kind of referred to different offices on campus. And the idea in a virtual one-stop is to not require a student to come to campus at all for service, and more importantly, to provide a single way for that student to ask any of those questions on the same interaction. So if I happen to be calling, or if I happen to be texting or using a chatbot, I want to ask a question that says something like this: stream of consciousness. Have I been admitted to the nursing program? Yes, great. How much do I owe? Right? And now we've transitioned from admissions to student accounts. And then if it's how much do I owe to how much financial aid do I have, or did you get my financial aid application? Right now we're in the financial aid office. And once that's done, maybe there are questions about priority registration and when I can register. So that's, again, back to the registrar's office. They may also then ask a question about military benefits, or if their computer is not working on campus or in the classroom or the library, why is that the case? So the idea there is to really offer that one-stop service place where a student can ask any one of those questions. A faculty can also ask any of those questions about IT support or LMS support, and find that it's very easy to reach out, number one, and number two, get very quick service. The last thing I thought I'd share on this slide really is we're very flexible too. So you don't have to go in all at once. In other words, you don't have to go live with every office at one time. We frequently will phase institutions in. Maybe we'll start with financial aid and the student accounts office, just because so many students have questions about those areas, about their financial aid or about their bill. And then we can add other departments as well. We can also work with institutions in after-hours support. So if they have a really great customer service experience while they're open and on campus from either 7 to 7, but nobody is probably available at the local institution after 7 or 8 p.m., we can then take over that service and provide those answers whenever the campus is closed. So I just want to let you know that there's that flexibility. So let's look at the next slide. And earlier in the presentation, we really talked about this concept called omnichannel. Omnichannel really is just a fancy way of saying communicate with a student the way they want to be communicated with. Or in other words, reach back to them in the way that they reach out to you. So if they text you, text them back. If they want to use a chatbot, then use a chatbot back. If they want to call, then call them or answer the phone and speak with them. But the idea here is whether it's social media, be it Facebook or Twitter, or a website with a web ticket, or via a mobile phone or a phone call, really try to enable all of those different communication modes, because every student is different in what they prefer. And then on the next slide, we're going to talk just very briefly about chatbots as well, because that's really kind of the new, very significant new offering in higher ed, is what if a student doesn't want to call or email or text or chat, but they may want to use a chat bot, meaning they want a non-live interaction, but they still want to get very, very personalized information back. So a student with a chat bot can either ask standard FAQ questions, like when is the institution open? Are we closed for snow? Maybe because we're based in Denver or up in the Boston area today, like so many institutions up there are closed because of snow and weather. or they can then be integrated type questions, again, just like they would ask a person, have you received my ICER? How do I apply for financial aid? What's my balance due? How do I enter my grades or view my grades? Those are all things that whether it's a person looking up data and giving that answer, or a chatbot that knows where to go to get that answer can provide that to a student as well. So what I thought I'd do is, we're just about done with kind of the overview of what we offer, but I wanted to share a couple success stories. So Rosie, if you want to advance to the next slide. In slide 20, you'll see that we have both large and small institutions that we work with. One of our largest is the California Community Colleges, all 114 of them, about 2.1 million students across the state of California. And any student today that is going to a community college that fills out their online admissions application, it's actually called CCC Apply, or California Community College Apply. If they have a question, when they reach out, they're actually working with us to get resolution. So the idea there is to, when a student is thinking about going to community college, maybe Friday night at 10 p.m., and they want to start classes on Monday, they can fill out their application. If they have a question, they can reach out and call us, text us, chat with us, etc. And you can see some of the outcomes there in terms of about a 24-second speed to answer, a 94% call resolution rate, meaning whether it's a call, a chat, a text, or an email, that 9.4 times out of 10, we're completely resolving that those issues, not one issue, but any issue the student may have in that one interaction. And then you can see too, our abandon rate in terms of phone calls is lower than 2%. So great success there. The next one that I thought I'd share is on the next slide is the Southern University system and the Southern A&M system in Louisiana. Very similar support there. What we're offering is financial aid, admissions records, and reg support for those institutions. And you can see, again, a 96% call resolution rate. And when we say call resolution, we really should say contact resolution, because again, whether the student reaches out via whatever mode, 96% of the time we're fully satisfying that student's request with less than, in this case, about a 1.6% abandon rate. So, and that's our, working with the Southern system. And the last success story we thought we'd share is on the next slide, is the Cal State San Bernardino. We do IT support for them. So this is more, working with students, certainly, when they have questions about their after-hours support, be it for IT or LMS, but also for faculty and staff as well. And it's, again, in their case, it's only after hours and holidays and weekends, because they're doing a great job meeting that level of service in-house with their own team. So again, very flexible in terms of those three critical solutions, be it, again, contact center, self-help apps and tools, or student nudging. The idea is to leverage whichever or combination of those three works best for the institution. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, Rosie, in slide 23. Just give you a very quick background on Black Belt Help today. We really are the #1 provider in the industry and feel like we provide the best level of support amongst any of the other players in the space. We are 100% higher ed focused, and we serve 200 plus institutions, and we take about 1 million interactions a year from students, staff, and faculty. And on the next slide, in slide 24, you'll see a couple of the logos that we work with. Again, there's California in the top left, but we also work with Yuba, where we just went live actually with the United States Military Academy at West Point, so the Army West Point facility. We also are about to go live with Pasadena City College on the upper right. So we've got some large implementations that we're working on right now. But these are just a couple of examples of either large institutions like those or some smaller institutions like Babson, LIM, and Mid-State Tech. So really, whether you're large or small or somewhere in between, the idea is we can really craft a solution that, if you move to the next slide, Rosie, our goal is to really provide any of these 5 results, and hopefully it's all 5 results. This is what, at the end of the day, when someone says, what's your purpose at Black Belt Help? This is what we're trying to really enable at institutions. So we really want to drive up student engagement. And when we say student engagement, we really want that student to feel like we certainly can't help making the buildings beautiful on campus. But what we can help is making sure that whenever they reach out for support, that someone is always there to answer their question 24/7, 365. That goes a long way in making that student feel engaged and committed to an institution. So that's kind of points 1 and 2 together, is really driving that 24/7 experience and making it as similar to Amazon as we can, right? Because very few people will say, I really dislike my service level at Amazon, right? And that's just because they're open 24/7. They always have an answer, and they always are there to help. And that's how we want to enable our partner institutions as well. The third item there really is to drive up and enable self-help, whether that's a mobile app, whether that's chatbot support or voice bot support. My daughter is funny with her cell phone. Her cell phone may be 5 feet away, but she will frequently ask Siri or say, hey, Alexa, a question, because she doesn't want to get up and move in her dorm room to get her phone. Now, I clearly should have an expectation that may be more, higher for her. But the bottom line is so many students are like, oh, my cell phone's across the room. I just want to ask it a quick question. So whether you're used to Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant, the idea is to leverage those types of tools and enable those support mechanisms for students. Because we know that all of those things will enable the last two. If we can provide really high levels of engagement, 24/7 access with self-help, we know that that's going to make students happier. And happier students, frankly, do retain and persist and ultimately complete. Now, are we the only reason they complete? Of course not, right? The institution does a great job of teaching and learning. They do a great job serving that student in person. But if we can do anything else, if we can expand that level of service and make sure that the student feels that the institution is going the extra mile, then it's just super critical and can drive each of those other factors up. So what I'm going to do at this point, that's really the end of the content that we share. But what I thought I'd do is open it up for questions and answers on the next slide. And then in a moment, what I'll do is turn it over to John. But I did want to see if we had any questions from institutions about what they've heard today.
Great, Anthony. We do have some questions coming in. So again, thank you for that great presentation and covering off that material for us. It has provoked a number of questions. Firstly, we have one about implementation. How long does it typically take to implement some of the services you've reviewed today?
Yeah, so great question. Thanks for asking that question from the institution side. It can take anywhere from, for something as simple as a chatbot or a mobile app, it's certainly shorter. It's typically anywhere from about 6 or 8 weeks on the short side to as long as 12 weeks. And the 12 weeks is more for a fully comprehensive virtual one-stop, meaning an inbound contact center that's 24/7 that handles maybe all of those inquiries from students, staff, and faculty. It also includes a chat bot and a voice bot and a mobile app and a knowledge base for self-help. So on the long side, it's anywhere from 2 to 3 months, and on the shorter side, anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. So great question.
Awesome. Okay, and we have another question about integrations. Are there other applications that you can integrate with? How does that look like? And what does that work? How does that work?
Yeah, so again, a great question, because there are so many different disparate systems on campus today. Most institutions will have an ERP or an SIS, be it Banner or PeopleSoft or Colleague or Genzabar or Workday, but they'll also probably have a CRM system, Salesforce or Slate or others. They'll probably have a ticketing system, be it ServiceNow or Cherwell or any other, but they may also have, an additional systems out there. And the idea is that we don't have to really integrate to them. All we need to do is pull data from them in a view-only way, because we're not going to change the data in those systems. We've heard very clearly from our partner institutions that they want us to stay away from changing data, but they really love it when we can serve students, staff, or faculty in a 24/7, 365 environment by giving them answers that are based on either the financial aid data in their Banner system or their Colleague system, or their latest admission status in Salesforce or in Slate, or maybe give instructions again to a faculty member on how to do a course copy from one semester to another on a Saturday at 2 p.m. So I hope that gives you an idea and a flavor. As long as there's an API, we can frankly pull data from that system and answer those questions as if we were on campus itself.
Awesome. All right. So so a question coming in from institution about should we start with all departments at once, or can we start with one and add departments later? How would you advise there?
Yeah, so that's another great question, because, and this is a case where it's unique for each institution. So when we do tend to go on campus and we'll meet with the campus leadership, be it the CIO, the VP of students, the president, et cetera, we'll work with that institution to find out what the best solution is for them. Because every college is unique. So maybe their admissions process and their enrollment process is very, very strong. But maybe there are some barriers in the financial aid or the student accounts bursar area where students feel like there are barriers. And even if they're not finding barriers with the staff, but there are barriers, for example, in financial aid, just because it is onerous to complete a FAFSA online. It is very tough to do all those different forms. And the idea there is whether they want to go live with a financial aid solution, a student accounts, or all of those different opportunities and offices, we can really accommodate whichever is beneficial for the institution and really whatever their needs are. And we've done both, where we've kind of gone all in, all live, all at once with all of those areas. But we've also very commonly worked with institutions where they start off with just financial aid and registrar services, and then maybe add something else either 6 months, 3 months, or a year later. So great question.
Okay, good. So a question about reporting. Can you talk about how one does reporting for the OneStop?
Yeah, so I think the key here, and I'm not sure which institution asked that, but again, pretty insightful question, because as we all know, it's great to provide that service, but maybe what's just as important is being able to report on all of the different service interactions, what areas they're asking questions about, how satisfied the student, staff, or faculty member was with the service they received. All of those things are all critical in the reporting area. So we do provide a reporting and analytics tool that provides dashboards that will make it very easy for leaders to see, how many interactions are coming in by what type, meaning are they coming in via phone, chat, text, email, chatbot, etc. What are they about? What offices questions are being answered, be it financial aid or others? And then how long are those interactions taking? We also do a survey at the end of every interaction for every student-faculty interaction so that we can track those interactions. We can also provide and learn from those experiences to make them better. We also then use that reporting to do something called a calibration session with colleges and universities. And what that is we'll listen to a call separately, meaning the Black Belt Help team separate from the institution. We'll apply a rubric to that call, let's say it's a call, and we'll score it based on our score and the institution score. And then, frankly, we'll switch papers and we'll compare our score. And if the score varies by any more than about 7 or 8%, then we need to calibrate our service expectations with the client. So typically what happens is the client will score the interaction better than we do. We're a little harder on ourselves. Maybe the college gives us a 94 and we give ourselves an 84. We then will spend time on that call and say, okay, what's the delta? And how do we make sure that we're now aligned more closely in terms of that service expectation? And the key there, of course, is you need the reporting to be able to do those types of calibration sessions. So thanks for those questions.
All right.
I think I'll do now.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, I know there may be others, and let me know if there are others, but what I'll do now is kind of turn it back over to John just to kind of finish this up. Thanks, everybody, for your attention so far, but we're going to kind of finish it up here in the next minute, but I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks much, Anthony. Appreciate that. Thanks for taking those questions for us. That's all the questions we have for today. So I do want to quickly just recap, though, before we close out, a little bit of follow-up information about the Campus Consortium grant program. So we will, as I mentioned earlier, have a number of grants still open this year. So we have one for IT Help Desk. We have another for Office 365, Student Services Contact Center grant, as we discussed today. Also a SIS grant is still open, a Smart Password Manager grant, as well as a Campus Portal. All of these have an application deadline of December 13th of 2019. So if you're interested in applying for any grants for any of the above technologies, I encourage you to check out campusconsortium.org. On our next slide, I do want to share with you some more information about upcoming webinars that we'll be running that will keep you all apprised of some of the additional grants that we're running and some of the other topics that we'll be covering. We've got a student recruiting CRM grant, and that is going to be discussed in our next grant briefing webinar. Look for that announcement to come shortly, and we will be emailing you some follow-up information on that today. We want everyone to know that we will be sharing our slides today that will give you a quick overview of some of the information that Anthony shared with us. Any questions you have or any information that you need from us, happy to brief you on that. We can, if needed, go into a little bit more detail for some of those who are asking today about the grant process, how it is earned, and we have a question about is the discount supplied to the software, or is an award that can cover the cost outright? So the way that our grant program works, these are in-kind grants that are designed to offset the implementation cost of a variety of solutions and services and technologies that the grant program sponsors. Our technology partners underwrite these grants. While we are very fortunate to have the support and the donations of the grant technology partners, we are limited in the funds that we are awarded and that we are in a position to provide. So we do have a rather significant due diligence process where we vet the applicants for consideration. That process includes an applicant assessment interview. We look to understand a little bit more about your goals for the grant, how those align with some of the larger strategic initiatives you have in place at your institution, how those align with the mission of not only your institution, but also that of the consortium, and the way that you are looking to reduce the cost of education for your institution and for your students, as well as improve outcomes for both learning and for a campus experience and student expectation deliverable. We are also then looking at your timelines and trying to understand a little bit more about how much of a priority the implementation is for your institution, what else you might have on your implementation plate, if you will. From there, we do then make a determination as to which applications will be advanced to the next phase of our process. That phase is called the technology assessment, and that is about a 60-minute interview with your tech leadership, where our tech partners aim to understand more about your current stack, some of your current capabilities, some of your scope for the implementation, understand, again, some of the resources available to you from a standpoint of human resources that will be working with you for an implementation. With that, we then receive a report back from the technology partners who give us an understanding of just how likely the solution and service will deliver on your expectations and be able to do so on the timelines you are outlining. At that point, we begin to make some determinations around which institutions will be awarded the grants and to what amount. The Campus Consortium offers both partial and full grant awards, and we notify our applicants at that time the amount of in-kind grant that they'll be receiving. This process typically takes anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks based on when we've received the application, the number of applications we received, and the scheduling of the different interviews and assessments that are required for us to glean what we need to know from each of the institutions that are applying, and the time that it takes for the grant consideration committee to meet up and make some determination. But we do aim to do this as swiftly as possible and keep the applicants informed as to the progress of their application, so that you're aware of the status of the application and what kind of timing you can expect before either hearing again from the consortium or learning more from our technology partners as they aim to stand up the timings for the tech assessment and some of the communication that they will be delivering as a follow-up. So that's a little bit about the grant program and a little bit about the process that one can expect after applying for a grant. But do again encourage you all to visit campusconsortium.org to review any of our current open grants and apply for those. And if you have any questions, you can always contact us through our contact page on our website. And if that's all we have for today, then I think we can wrap up. But we'll wish everyone a great rest of the week, and thank again Anthony Humphreys for his great presentation from Black Belt Help, and we look forward to working with all of you in the future and appreciate your interest in the Campus Consortium Technology Program. With that, I will sign off. Again, I'm John Wanamaker, Campus Consortium Executive Director, and appreciate everyone joining us today. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, Anthony. Thanks very much. Rosie, thank you for setting this up and for your coordination of the webinar today.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you. Bye-bye.